Good morning. It is Friday, May the 14th, and this is the drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So we're going to do the daily offering for spiritual warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'm going to do part 6 of Live Not by Lies. Like I said, this is a juicy book. It is great. I recommend it highly. It's by Rod Dreher. You can get it in the Kindle store, and I highly recommend it if you really want a good. It's a book that deals with politics, but it has depth. It is able to explain in depth why the things he's talking about matter and where he's getting his ideas. He's able to explain the foundations for everything. So, again, I highly recommend it. Along those lines, I have, in the process, let's say, of publishing. That means that Amazon is now reviewing my book, and everything's ready to go. I submitted it for publishing, and once it gets reviewed and I get the okay for Amazon, it'll be up for sale. And it's a companion book to my podcast, and it's entitled The Drill, and How to Be a True Conservative, and it will sell for $2.99. It'll be about 70, 80 pages, thereabouts. One of the best parts of the book is the last part of the book is recommended reading. And so it gives a list of all of the books that I have read and that contribute. You know, if you want to know where does Ron get these ideas, why does he think the way he does, that gives you a head start in understanding where I'm coming from. So, and then this is going to be the first edition. What I plan to do is publish a second edition within the next 6 months. So it'll be like a continuing polishing, if you will, making the book better. So approximately every 6 months I'll come out with a new edition. So, but again, when it's ready, it's actually for sale in the Kindle store. I will let you know. So, and right now we're going to go ahead and do the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. My power will cause your desert to bloom anew. My power will fill your desert with all kinds of trees, cedars, acacias, myrtles, olive, and cypress. The firs and pines will burst forth with new life, and everyone will see this and know that I am the God who has redeemed you from the wilderness. I will cause you to be prosperous and to grow like a garden with plenty of water. Wherever this water flows, it will bring life and fresh water to the dead places of your life. Trees of spiritual fruit will grow all along this river and produce fresh spiritual fruit in your life. The fruit of my Spirit will burst forth: my love, joy, peace, forbearance, guidance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It will draw many to me because of the blessing of my new life in your heart. Prayer declaration. Father, plant in my life and desert places the trees of new life in you. You have redeemed me from the wilderness and will cause your spiritual fruit to burst forth in my life. Fill my life with the fruit of your Spirit, that all who know me will see the fruit of love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control in all that I do. Let me be a blessing to others because of the rivers of blessing and new life that you have given to me. Amen. Let's see here. So, now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 4, or at least part of it, called Capitalism Woke and Watchful. And last time yesterday I did Back to the Future from chapter 3, and where the author is making the case that we are basically repeating the things that have happened in the early 20th century. Capitalism Woke and Watchful. Camilla Bendova sits in her armchair in the Prague apartment where she and her late husband, Vaclav, used to hold underground seminars to build up the anti-communist dissident movement. It has been 30 years since the fall of communism, but Bendova is not about to lessen her vigilance about threats to freedom. I mentioned to her that tens of millions of Americans have installed in their homes so-called smart speakers that monitor conversations for the sake of making domestic life more convenient. Kamala visibly recoils. The appalled look on her face telegraphs a clear message. How can Americans be so gullible? To stay free to speak the truth, she tells me, you have to create yourself a zone of privacy that is inviolate. And as a quick interjection, again, privacy, we come back to the issue of privacy as a foundation for everything else, but in a different way than I had thought about earlier, and that is a foundation for freedom of speech. She reminded me that the secret police had bugged her apartment and that she and her family had to live with the constant awareness that the government was listening to every sound they made. The idea that anybody would welcome into their home a commercial device that records conversations and transmits them to a third party is horrifying to her. No consumer convenience is worth that risk. Information means power, Camilla says. We know from our life under the totalitarian regime that if you know something about someone, you can manipulate him or her. You can use it against them. The secret police have evidence of everything like that. They could use it all against you. Anything. Kamala pointed out to me the scars along the living room wall of her Prague apartment where, after the end of communism, she and her husband had ripped out the wires the secret police had used to bug their home. It turns out that no one in the Benda family uses smartphones or emails. Too risky, they say, even today. Some might call this paranoia, but in the light of Edward Snowden's revelations, it looks a lot more like prudence. People think that they are safe because they haven't said anything controversial, says Kamala. That is very naive. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and Germany's 1990 reunification, the German government opened the vast files of the Stasi, East Germany's secret police, to its victims. None of the Soviet bloc states had a surveillance apparatus as thorough as East Germany's, nor had any communist rivals developed a culture of snitching with roots as deep and wide in the population. Historians later discovered that vast numbers of East German citizens, with no prompting by the government, volunteered negative information about their friends and neighbors. Across the country, people were on the lookout for divergent viewpoints, which were then branded as dangerous to the state, reported the magazine Der Spiegel. This practice gave the East German police state an unparalleled perspective on the private lives of its citizens. I might also mention that insert here is that usually the people that were ratting you out were your relatives, your wife, your children, but it was done because the state would pay for information. So this is a way that East Germans would make a little extra money by giving juicy information to the state that may or may not have been accurate. Should totalitarianism, hard or soft, come to America, the police state would not have to establish a web of informants to keep tabs on the private lives of the people. The system we have now already does this, and most Americans are scarcely aware of its thoroughness and ubiquity. The rapidly growing power of information technology and its ubiquitous presence in daily life immensely magnifies the ability of those who control institutions to shape society according to their ideals. Throughout the past two decades, economic and technological changes that occurred under liberal democratic capitalism, have given both the state and corporations surveillance capabilities of which Lenin and Stalin could only have dreamed. In East Germany, the populace accustomed itself to total surveillance and made snitching normal behavior. This is part of the development of what the state called the socialist personality, which considered privacy to be harmful. In our time and place, the willingness of people to disclose deeply personal data about themselves, either actively or on platforms like Facebook or passively through online data harvesting, is creating a new kind of person, the social media personality, who cannot imagine why privacy matters at all. And that's the first section of Chapter 4. And again, privacy is the foundation. No privacy, there's no reason to have property or property rights. You know, the state can just walk into your house, or in the case of Václav Havel and his wife, into their apartment and do whatever they see fit. You know, so, and again, what he's saying here about the social media personalities that supposedly can't understand what privacy is even all about. Getting brainwashed into believing that privacy is just an arbitrary social construct and not a necessary part of life, a part of life that you can't dispense with. It's reality. We are a species that is self-conscious. That is the essence of being human. We cannot do anything else. Other animals, mammals, aren't self-conscious. It's what differentiates us between them. And they have no sense of or need for privacy. They don't establish property. They don't build houses or apartments or anything of that nature. So, because they have no need or desire for privacy, because they're not self-conscious. Human beings are essentially self-conscious and therefore have that need for privacy. And so that's why we have private property and why we have property rights. Next section, the rise of woke capitalism. To Americans conditioned by the Cold War, the all-powerful state seemed the biggest threat to liberty. We grew up reading Orwell in high school and hearing news accounts of defectors from communist countries who testified to the horrors of life under total government control. Besides, American culture has always prized the lone individual who stands out from the herd. The most iconic American, the cowboy, testifies to this enduring value. The American conservative tradition, unlike that of Europe, has been philosophically antagonistic to the state. Yet recognizing that the Soviet Union and its allies were a genuine threat, post-war conservatives resigned themselves, putting up with big government as a necessary evil to protect American freedom. Very often conservatives will say that winning the Cold War was what shows that capitalism triumphs over communism. It's false. It's absolutely false. The Cold War was fought between two governments. Okay, so winning the Cold War just says our government was bigger, richer, and stronger than their government. If you really want to get an idea of the power of capitalism versus the power of communism, where you need to look is in the Olympics. Check the Olympics and check the medal counts and see how the West did versus the East. Because Western countries, these athletes were prepared in a capitalistic style. You went to a private company that would develop your talents, help you develop your talents so that you could compete on the world stage. In the Soviet Union and East Germany, etc., everybody belonged to the state. So the state would go ahead and basically pluck athletes or people with athletic talents and potential to live an athletic lifestyle. The state would basically squirrel them away in a place somewhere and train them, and that was their job for most of at least their young life, was to develop their athletic skills and abilities in order to help promote communism. But anyways, look at the medal counts, then make a decision as to which is better, communism or capitalism. But they didn't have to like it, the conservatives. To many on the right, especially libertarians schooled by the novels of Ayn Rand, corporations seemed a natural opponent of the Leviathan state. As institutions of private enterprise, corporations were seen by conservatives as more naturally virtuous than the state. And that's one of the areas where conservatives and Ayn Rand has gone wrong. It is the individual that is the natural opponent of the Leviathan state. The Cold War might have compelled conservatives to make peace with big government, but they were willing to accept big business as a bulwark against a too powerful state. And on the global front, as an important weapon in advancing American soft power against Soviet hegemony. Though liberals are less inclined to sanctify business than conservatives, the end of the Cold War brought about the conversion of leading liberal politicians, think Bill Clinton and Tony Blair, to the gospel of market globalization, already fervently accepted by all but a cranky fringe of Republicans. Over the past quarter century, globalization and technological advances have enabled a staggering expansion of corporate power. Now, an elite club of global megacorporations are more powerful than many countries. Walmart has more annual revenue than Spain, and more than twice as much as Russia. ExxonMobil is bigger, revenue-wise, than India, Norway, or Turkey. As international strategist Parag Khanna says, in a world where Apple has more cash on hand than 2/3 of the world's nations, corporations are likely to overtake all states in terms of clout. In an America that now runs on the internet, 5 companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, have an almost incalculable influence over public and private life. At the same time, big business has moved steadily leftward on social issues. Standard business practices long required staying out of controversial issues on the grounds that taking sides in the culture war would be bad for business. That all changed in a big way in 2015 when the state of Indiana passed a religious freedom bill that would have given some protection to businesses sued for anti-gay discrimination. A powerful coalition of corporate leaders, including the heads of Apple, Salesforce, Eli Lilly, and others, threatened economic retaliation against the state if it did not reverse course. It did. Since then, lobbyists for national and international corporations have leaned heavily on state governments to pass pro-LGBT legislation and to resist religious liberty laws. And what's interesting about this is that the essence of totalitarianism is minority rule. And that's exactly what's happening here. Lesbians, gays, bisexuals, they're in terms of the overall number, I think they say gays are 1%. 1% of the population. But gays have such a clout, such political clout, that they can manipulate entire states. And if that's not totalitarianism, what is? The stereotype that college students leave their liberalism behind on campus when they graduate into the real world is badly outdated. In fact, today's graduates are often taught to bring their social justice ideals with them and advocate for what is called corporate social responsibility. True, nobody has a good word to say for corporate social irresponsibility. Like social justice, the phrase is a euphemism for a progressive cultural politics. As author Heather McDonald has written, graduates of the academic victimology complex are remaking the world in their image. In her 2018 book, The Diversity Delusion, McDonald explored how corporate human resources departments function as a social justice commissariat. Nearly 90% of Fortune 500 companies have diversity offices, she reports, and the corporate mania for equity, diversity, and inclusion informs corporate culture at many levels, including hiring, promotion, bonuses, and governing the norms of interaction in the workplace. Some multinational corporations impose progressive cultural politics on workplaces in more socially conservative countries. Several Polish employees of the national branches of world-renowned corporations told me that they have felt compelled to participate in LGBT activism inside their companies. As Christians, they believed endorsing pride violated their consciousness, but given economic conditions in Poland, they feared refusing to conform what would cost them their jobs. There is nothing wrong, of course, with people trying to create workplaces where people are treated fairly and judged according to performance. That is what we call justice. Social justice, as we have seen, is not the same thing. McDonald found little to no empirical evidence to support social justice strategies within the corporate world. Despite this, these supposedly hard-headed business executives ignore the bottom line when it comes to diversity programs and corporate social responsibility initiatives. It's as if these rites and catechisms were more an expression of religious belief than a response to real-world conditions. The embrace of aggressive social progressivism by big business is one of the most underappreciated stories of the last 2 decades. Critics call it woke capitalism, a snarky theft of the left-wing slang term indicating progressive enlightenment. Woke capitalism is now the most transformative agent within the region of social justice because it unites progressive ideology with the most potent force in American life, consumerism, and making money. In his 2018 letter to investors, Larry Fink, CEO of the global investment company BlackRock, said that corporate social responsibility is now part of the cost of doing business. Society is demanding that companies, both public and private, serve a social purpose. Now I'm going to, Fink wrote, to prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but also show how it makes positive contribution to society. And he's wrong when he says society is demanding. No such thing. Again, what it is small, very small minorities within society are demanding. And these companies and corporations are bowing to that pressure. Shame on them for doing so. Poll results about consumer expectations back Fink up, supposedly. Millennials and Generation Z customers are especially prone to seeing their consumer expenditures as part of creating a socially conscious personal brand identity. For many companies, then, signaling progressive virtues to consumers is a smart business move in the same way that signaling all-American patriotism would have been to corporations in the 1950s. But what counts as a positive contribution to society? Corporations like to brand themselves as being in favor of a predictable constellation of causes, all of them guiding stars of the progressive cosmos. Woke capitalism branding harnesses the unmatched propaganda resources of the advertising industry to send the message, both explicitly and implicitly, the beliefs of social conservatives and religious traditionalists are obstacles to the social good. So, and in this particular case, because what you need to ask yourself is, because the issue, again, as I've told you, is the individual versus the state. No matter how it cares to manifest itself, you have small groups of people that are exercising undue amounts of influence over businesses in an effort to get all businesses really to become nothing more than arms of the state. That's not communism, that's fascism. Okay? That's the way the fascists thought and operated around in the 20s and 30s. Mussolini did that. You had unions, and then you had and they were represented in government. So the parliament would have some kind of union or union representatives, or maybe in the executive branch, whatever. And you would also have businesses that were allowed to operate and look for profits, but they were subject to the wants and needs of the state. The wants and the needs of the state came ahead of profits. So the government would tell these businesses what it is that they were going to produce, when, and in what quantity. So, now, one of the things about individualism versus the state and versus the big business is, you may think, well, how can individuals exert power? Well, if you try to take on anybody and take them on their own turf and take them on according to their strengths, if you're fighting a big guy and he's got big muscles, and you try to pit against him muscle to muscle, you're probably going to lose. You got to find your advantages, what it is that gives you an advantage, and play the game from your in a way that favors you. And the same thing with the individual. One of the things you can do in when you're dealing with big companies is don't wait until this big company goes LGBTQ or whatever, or starts having brainwashing classes to brainwash you about being white, for instance. Ask up front. When you're sitting down for an interview with somebody, you say, you guys don't go for all that brainwashing crap, do you? You're not out trying to insert yourself in people's private lives and manipulate them according to some odd theory you may have about social justice, are you? Find out up front. You're also sending the corporation, every person that does that sends that corporation a message. Okay, if you just go in, hi, how are you, and here's my qualifications, and here's my education, and oh, you're hired, oh, gee, thanks a lot, and then the door slams behind you, then all of a sudden you find yourself in brainwashing situations where you're having to, re-education camps, that's what the communists used to call it, so that you can be a woke employee. It's your own fault. Don't do that. You can use that as a weapon. Plus, or use some your power, which is at the interviewing process, in your favor. So you need to do that. Exercise, as I've always said, the number one rule of power is exercise the power you already have. Too many times we look in a situation, we say, I can't do anything. I don't have enough power. We used to see that in the Air Force. People would say, well, I can't do anything because I'm only a sergeant. I need to be a staff sergeant. Then when they become a staff sergeant, it's, well, I still don't have enough power. I need to be a tech sergeant, a master sergeant. And then finally, when they get all the way to the top, they become a chief master sergeant. They're still not exercising any power. Because they have a mindset, a weakness mindset. And you need to change that and see that you as the individual have tremendous amounts of power. And and then your first job in these situations is using it, finding out exactly how to use it and use it appropriately. May require you to stop and do a little bit of thinking and maybe do some research, but you can do it. You as an individual can make the difference against corporations and against the state, etc. So, look at Václav Havel. The state was monitoring everything he was doing, yet he was having secret meetings with other dissidents at his house, the same house that was being bugged by the state. And also remember that the state is full of what? Bureaucrats. Are all the bureaucrats in the state all down for the struggle? Are they eager to root out dissidents? No. They don't give a rat's ass about any of that. They work for the state because it pays. Okay? And they can count on getting their paycheck every 2 weeks, and other than that, they just don't care. If you can get to them, you can buy them off. Because that's what's important. The more a state goes communist, the more money is important. You wouldn't think so. You would think that the more communist a country gets, that the less money is important. The more it's important. It's like when you go to Washington, D.C., you become a representative, and you go to Washington, D.C., you're in a capitalist environment. Okay, the trading that's going on may not be in gold or dollars or bonds or stocks, but they're trading nonetheless. You can get anything done in Washington you want to if you're willing to pay the price. We could have a country in which we could pass a law that bans abortion tomorrow if we as conservatives and Republicans were willing to pay the political price, which would probably be something that would mean that the liberals would stay in power for the next 50 or 100 years, something like that. But the point is, everything's for sale in Washington. You got enough political capital, you can get anything done that you want to get done. So, back in a minute. Thank you very much, and that brings me to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. Next time I'm going to be looking at, again, another segment of this book, Live Not by Lies, and perhaps in the same chapter, perhaps in another, we'll see. But anyways, remember to be honest, be smart, be beautiful, all the things that the left doesn't want you to be. Do it anyways, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.